Imagine you send a message. They don't respond, so you send another one. Then you check whether they're online. You look at their social media. You wonder if you said something wrong. And before you know it, you're no longer living your life. You're trying to control someone else's attention. That is where desperation begins. And here's what makes it dangerous. Desperation doesn't always look like begging. Sometimes it looks like generosity. Sometimes it looks like confidence. Sometimes it even looks like caring. But underneath it is the same problem. You have given an external person too much control over your internal state. And Stoics understood this thousands of years ago. Epictetus taught that some things are within our control and others are not. Your choices, judgments, and actions belong to you. Another person's feelings, approval, attention, and decisions do not. So if you want to know whether you're becoming desperate, don't ask, "Do I want this person?" Ask a harder question. What am I willing to sacrifice to get them? Because the 7 habits you're about to see reveal exactly where that line begins to disappear. Sign 1. You keep chasing someone who isn't reciprocating. You initiate the conversation. They give short replies. You initiate again. They cancel plans. You try harder. You tell yourself they're just busy. Maybe they're going through something. Maybe if you show them how interested you are, they'll eventually feel the same way. But eventually, persistence stops being confidence. It becomes refusal to accept information. A Stoic doesn't confuse desire with control. You are allowed to want someone. You're allowed to make your interest clear. But once you've done your part, their response belongs to them. The strong move isn't to pretend you don't care. It's to recognize reality without letting reality destroy your composure. Interest says, "I would like this." Desperation says, "I need this to happen." And that difference changes everything. But chasing isn't the only way desperation reveals itself. Sometimes you don't chase people. You make them constantly reassure you. Sign 2. You need constant reassurance. You ask, "Are we good?" You wonder why their tone changed. You reread messages looking for hidden meaning. They don't compliment you as much, so suddenly you question your value. Their attention drops, and your confidence drops with it. You may think you're looking for clarity, but sometimes you're actually asking another person to regulate your self-worth. That's dangerous because now their behavior controls your emotional state. Marcus Aurelius repeatedly warned against becoming dependent on other people's opinions and judgments. The Stoic question is different. Instead of asking, "Do they still approve of me?" ask, "Did I act according to my principles? Did you communicate honestly? Did you behave with self-respect? Did you do what you believed was right?" If the answer is yes, another person's approval cannot become the foundation of your identity, because the moment someone else has to repeatedly convince you that you're valuable, you've handed them authority they were never supposed to have, and that leads to a subtler form of desperation. Sign 3. You over-explain yourself. Someone misunderstands you. You explain. They still disagree. You explain more. Now you're defending every detail of your behavior, trying to make sure they see you exactly the way you want to be seen. But ask yourself what you're actually trying to control. Are you trying to communicate, or are you trying to control their opinion of you? Those are not the same thing. A secure man can explain himself clearly, then he can tolerate being misunderstood. Because he knows his responsibility is to control the quality of his communication, not another person's interpretation. You don't need every person to understand you. You need to know that you are honest about who you are. And if you constantly need to prove your value, the next sign becomes almost inevitable. Sign 4. You try too hard to impress. You mention the money, the accomplishments, the people you know, the women you've been with, the things you've done. Maybe you're not even consciously bragging. You're just constantly trying to make sure people know you're impressive. But real confidence doesn't need to announce itself every 5 minutes. Marcus Aurelius admired people who possessed ability and virtue without making a performance out of them. That's the difference between having value and needing people to recognize your value. If you're competent, let your actions reveal it. If you're successful, you don't need every conversation to become evidence. Because the more aggressively you try to convince people that you're valuable, the more power their opinion has over you. And sometimes desperation doesn't look like showing off. Sometimes it looks like giving everything away. Sign 5. You give too much to earn affection. You become available whenever they need something. You constantly do favors. You pay for everything. You give time, attention, money, energy, and none of those things are automatically bad. Generosity can be a virtue. But there is a question you need to ask. Would I still do this if I knew I would receive nothing in return? If the answer is no, you may not be giving. You may be negotiating. You're thinking, if I do enough for them, maybe they'll value me. That's not generosity anymore. That's validation disguised as generosity. Marcus Aurelius emphasized doing good without turning virtue into a performance for recognition. Give because it reflects your character, not because you're secretly hoping the other person will become obligated to love you, choose you, or stay. Because the moment your generosity becomes a transaction, you're no longer free. And nothing exposes that loss of freedom faster than what happens when someone's attention suddenly disappears. Sign 6. You panic. When someone pulls away, their replies become slower, they seem distant, and suddenly your mind starts racing. What happened? Did I do something? Is there someone else? So you text more. You demand an explanation. You check their social media. You change your behavior. You try to pull them back. Notice what's happening. Their behavior changed, but the real crisis is happening inside you. You've interpreted uncertainty as an emergency. Stoicism gives you a different response. Separate the event from your judgment about the event. They became distant. That's the event. I'm losing them, and I need to fix this immediately. That's your interpretation. Those are not the same thing. You don't have to react to every impression your mind produces. Pause. Observe. Then decide what is actually within your control. Sometimes the strongest response is action. Sometimes it's a conversation. And sometimes it's accepting that the other person is making a choice you cannot control. But there is one sign deeper than all 6. Because you can chase someone, seek reassurance, over-explain, impress them, and even overgive. But the most desperate thing a man can do is something else. Sign 7. You abandon your standards to keep someone you say yes when you mean no. You tolerate disrespect you would normally reject. You hide your opinions. You change your values. You become whatever you think the other person wants. And you tell yourself you're compromising because you care. But there's a difference between compromise and self-betrayal. Compromise adjusts behavior. Self-betrayal destroys standards. And this is where desperation reaches its deepest form. You are no longer simply trying to keep someone. You're willing to lose yourself to do it. The Stoic answer isn't, I don't need anybody. That's not strength. That's another form of dependence. Dependence on pretending you don't care. The Stoic answer is, I can care deeply without surrendering command of myself. You can love someone and still have standards. You can want someone and accept rejection. You can be generous without buying affection. You can explain yourself without begging to be understood. You can pursue something without making your identity dependent on getting it. Because real strength isn't the absence of desire. It's the ability to experience desire without becoming its servant. So look back at these 7 habits. Chasing someone who doesn't reciprocate. Needing constant reassurance. Over-explaining yourself. Trying desperately to impress. Giving to earn affection. Panicking when someone pulls away. And abandoning your standards to keep someone. They all point to the same problem. You have allowed an external outcome to become more important than your internal command. And that's what Stoicism teaches you to reverse. Stop asking, how do I make them choose me? Ask, how do I make sure I never have to betray myself to be chosen? Because anyone can look confident when they're getting exactly what they want. The real test is who you become when you don't. A desperate man needs the outcome. A disciplined man controls his response to it. And that is the difference between wanting something and being owned by it.